Grouchy Gamer blog post, 11:43 p.m., February 8th. Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to Grouchy Gamer. Today we're doing another fan-submitted game playthrough. This one is a little interesting, as normally I just play games that you guys recommend, but today someone actually sent me in something that I'm pretty sure they created themselves. They call themselves Microscopic Mike. That should have been the first clue that the executable file that they sent me, Microorganic Mayhem.exe, was a product of their own creation. I hemmed and hawed about this because I really don't want to turn fan submissions into a, hey, please play my game and tell me what you think. However, after toying around with the game for a bit, I do feel like I want to share it. I sent something back to Mike to ask him if he had a spot everyone else could download it and maybe some kind of digital tip jar. The game is a typical 2D RPG on a square-based grid in the overworld. It does seem like Mike probably popped right into RPG Maker and even used some of the default or popularly downloaded assets for a lot of this. You start off in a lab where you get to read some notes and lore on the world that you're thrust into. It turns out that your character is a scientist who accidentally froze himself in his own invention, and when he finally got released, he awoke into a world of chaos that his fellow scientists unleashed onto the world. In essence, they were trying to develop some kind of microbial fungus to treat disease and tackle it as it spread from person to person. If you've ever read any science fiction at all, you probably know where this is going. Yes, instead of curing the diseases, the fungus just multiplies as it travels from person to person and turns them into an abomination. I will tell you, the plot of this game is not exactly the novelty that hooked me on it. Anyway, now the world is basically crawling with humans who are infected by the fungus. Some highlights of the notes are, for the most part, the fungus basically kills most targets over time, but others, for some unknown reason, sustain the fungal growth longer. The notes are torn and key pieces are shown to be redacted or lost to time, though I was able to make out that it seems to have something to do with body temperature. In some instances, individuals, for reasons beyond anything that was documented, are especially advantageous hosts for the fungus, and it can spread far beyond what could ever be imagined, resulting in some creepy humanoid critters that lack any humanity that they once had. Out in the first area, called the Urban Metro, we get the first taste of what gameplay is like in this game. You control your avatar across the board. You can move in any of the four directions as you navigate the overworld. The first area is a pretty standard derelict post-apocalyptic city. As you move to a tile, I noticed that there's basically a second-long delay before you can move to another one. I thought this was strange and a little annoying at first, but it didn't take long for me to figure out the rationale behind this design choice. As you move about, you will eventually see what looks like green humanoid sprites on the map, as they seem to be attempting to converge on you. They all have the same movement that you do, and are limited by the same second-long restriction after every step as well. However, as they were computers, they were frame perfect, moving as soon as they were able to again, slightly outpacing what I could do. Eventually, one of them got to me, and the screen went black, and a typical RPG turn-based encounter ensued. The menu from the screen looked roughly the same as any other RPG. You had the option to fight, use items, and run, and oddly there was also an option to just give up. The enemy was titled Infected Level 1, calling back to the documents about the level of infection these species had. It mostly looked like the shape of a person with pale greenish skin. Their clothes were either tattered or fully grown over with this green, mossy substance, presumably the fungus that was growing on them. Unlike the overworld sprites and environment, this enemy battle sprite was beautifully crafted, down to the little details like the shoes growing small mushrooms on them. I decided to try running first. It failed, and I was rewarded with a hit that did about 10% of my HP. I gave it another go, and this time it succeeded. However, it put me right back on the spot in the overworld next to the infected again, and I hardly had a moment to process it before the encounter screen kicked back up. Okay, lesson learned. I chose fighting this time. I groaned as it seemed I was barely doing double to this thing's health bar what it was doing to me every turn. I scraped through that encounter and started exploring, but it was not too much longer before another one got close enough to fight me. The strangest thing about it was also titled Infected Level 1, but had a completely unique sprite. It had the same general mossy vibe and decaying clothes and body as the original one, but it was just a completely different hand-drawn person being overtaken by this fungal mass. To be clear, this was not a one-off, as it seems like there are anywhere from 20 to 30 unique sprites for this enemy type, as I would learn. I was beaten pretty badly for my last encounter, and that small slip-up in trying to run at first seemed to make all the difference as my character's HP dropped to 0. The screen faded to black for a moment, but when it came back there was another hand-drawn animation. The infected grabbed my player character, whose back was facing the screen. It grabbed the character by the face, and the fungus seemed to extend and fully envelop them in it. It was an incredibly detailed animation for something that only lasted around 7 seconds. The game quickly faded to a game over screen, but not before the following text box showed up. Not bad, but I feel like you didn't get to enjoy that enough. It was an odd and somewhat unsettling message. I could not place why, but I just didn't like something about the way it made my stomach feel. Nonetheless, I booted up the game again and started over. I took a little bit more time in exploring the room at the beginning. I was able to find some items that I had overlooked. It was a few med kits that I could use to recover HP, and a power drill. The power drill was an equipable item that boosted my damage output. These two things in combination made my exploration a lot more successful this time around. I made my way around the maze of abandoned cars, trying to chart a path as quickly as possible so to avoid the infected who seemed to close in on me. After some trial and error and power drilling, I determined that there was an indefinite amount of them respawning for every one I took down. It was kind of a thrilling experience, the dread and stress of each second-long wait in between movements, thinking about what path to take, while also trying to hit the key as soon as I could. I eventually got myself into a jam where I had two of them closing in on me from different sides. They both got to adjacent tiles to me, and then when the encounter started, to my surprise, I had to fight two of them at once. Even with the medkits and drill, I did not come into the encounter at high enough HP to be prepared to fight both of them off, and I met my second end. When the next screen appeared, there was another unique cutscene. One of the infected held my character from behind, holding their arms back, and the other put both hands onto its face. Again, the character's face being obscured the whole time. Just like before, the fungus slowly engulfed the player character. It was in this moment that I noticed the unique sprites shown for each of the two. They perfectly matched the unique sprites that had shown up in the encounter. It was the same way with the first animation too, now that I thought about it. I pondered this as again another text box popped up. 2 is really better than 1. Hope you're enjoying. What a strange message before a game over screen. It was like the dev, Mike, was trying to taunt me through the text boxes. It was really out of sync with everything else in the game, though. It was also just generally strange to say, I hope you're enjoying a game that you're losing. To be so smug after clearly putting so much time and effort into these animations. Or maybe that was the point. The animations were so detailed because he expected you to see them so often? Nonetheless, I popped back into the game. I was a little curious about something at this point. This little give up button on the encounter menu was really eating at me. I got into an encounter with another unique level 1 sprite. I hit the give up button, and it faded as if going to the game over screen. It showed my character drop to their knees before the infected, outfit again, always matching the specific one to the battle sprite. It gently put its hand on my character's face again, and the animation played out mostly the same otherwise. The text this time read, "Oh, what in particular about this one did you like?" Like? It had such a strange way of phrasing things. It seemed to imply that the fun of the game was losing, and that it was an objective in and of itself. The game faded to the game over screen, and I booted it up. On a whim, I went and did the only thing I could think of doing next. I got myself back into a position to re-trigger the joint encounter with 2 at once, and then I hit the give up button. A different animation played again. Once more, the player character dropped to his knees, but this time the 2 infected linked arms with him, and dragged him off as the infection could be seen spreading from their bodies to its. Something about this one made me feel really uneasy, and I dreaded the incoming message. It said, "Good. The longer the infection lasts, the longer you will get to enjoy it." Game over once again. This is around when I stopped playing and started writing this post. I toyed around a bit more, seeing just how many of the hand-drawn sprites Mike had created for this game, but eventually I stopped, because something about it was making me deeply uneasy. But I wanted to share the experience with you and give Mike the opportunity to see how interested people might be in a full release of this game. I attached a couple of screenshots of the various sprites below. I will follow up and let you know if Mike gives me a release link. Grouchy Gamer blog post, 4:25 p.m., February 10th. Hey all, so a lot has transpired since the last post. You guys were really into hearing more about Microorganic Mayhem. I reached out to Mike, and I hate to say this, but this dude is weird. I told him how popular the game was with everyone, and how people were clamoring to play it, but he just won't post it anywhere. So many emails going back and forth with him, but he just kept saying some variation on the same thing. He told me the game was meant for me. He said that others could already play the game, but it wouldn't be the same for them. I asked what he meant by that, and he told me this, which I'm not even going to try to paraphrase. Others can play the game, but they won't enjoy it as much as you. This game exists elsewhere for other people, in different forms. You could play their versions, and you probably would not enjoy it. In fact, I think you have. Others could play your version, and they might not enjoy it. We are not all the same. We enjoy things differently. I asked him if the game was somehow different when I ran it, but he seemed disinterested in that and simply nudged me to keep playing so I could share what I found. I'm a little frustrated. I don't really like this game that much, I think. The animations are a little creepy, and the game lacks the kind of strategic depth that I normally like about an RPG. I thought about just uploading a share file link and letting you guys have it, but that felt a little wrong to Mike, regardless of how weird he is. I will just continue to detail what happens in this game as I play through it. I started back at the lab. This time I knew where all the items were, and I knew where a couple of the dead ends were. This helped me advance faster than I had ever been able to do before. Eventually, I found a building that had a door. It had a generic orange sign over it that was identical to the one I had walked out of. The name card for the area read, Laboratory Number 2. Real insightful stuff. I get how he had so much time for the animations and sprites. Laboratory Number 2 was, I kid you not, a copy and paste of the first zone. That's how lazy it was. However, there were a number of enemy sprites moving around the map. There was no way for me to get around them, so I just angled to encounter them one at a time. The name for them read, Infected Level 2. I was ready to roll my eyes before I got a good look at the first battle sprite. The limbs of this humanoid creature were now basically stretched out as if the moss substance had caused them to expand. They hunched over and their face seemed to drip this green sludge. I say seemed to drip, not that it was hanging, but rather there was actually a small animation to this sprite that caused a slight drip of this fungal substance to drop from its mouth. The rest of it was static, as was all of the normal sprites. I didn't like the way this thing looked, and used the drill to deal as much damage as I could. It hit harder than the previous enemies, but I scraped through. After I had to use up all of my medkits, before the second one engaged me. I took it out as well. I continued on through the area, using the symmetry of the room to figure out where I should go. I found where the items in the first room were. I got an upgraded attachment to my drill, and picked up some more medkits and something called a mega medkit, which basically healed all of my HP. I held on to that one for now, using the others to heal back up. In the chamber that corresponded to the location my character emerged from, there was a tall green sprite in a similar chamber. I approached it to interact with it, and an encounter started. It named the creature Forbidden Boss. It looked like an infected level 2, but its lab coat was completely spotless of the green fungus. Instead, its face had hollow eyes and a gaping mouth, which seemed to drip the same sludge from each opening. It was a horrendous-looking abomination, and its limbs were stretched out so it appeared taller than anything so far. I was determined to beat it with this new upgraded drill. It was going well, until suddenly the fight option stopped working on occasion. Text would read, Familiarity makes you unable to strike with full force. Then the Forbidden Boss would get a free attack. This frustrating turn of events quickly caused a battle that was going my way to turn against me as my HP dropped to 0. I settled in for the next cutscene. I thought about just looking away, but my eyes felt glued to the screen as the creature pinned my character with one of its long, slender fungal arms. Then it proceeded to spit blobs of moss into my character, which started to spread across its body. Before the screen faded to black, and before the text appeared, the hollowed-eyed boss stared right towards the screen. Don't you want to enjoy this to its fullest extent? The text said. I read this as if the creature was talking to me, but I knew from previous versions of this message that it was Mike's strange taunts hidden in the game. I shook my head and simply rebooted it. I clearly missed something. I retraced my steps. At this point, getting through the early sections were no problem now that I knew where I was going. The punishing aspects of the game only came from not knowing where to go right away, and hemorrhaging HP throughout multiple unnecessary encounters. After dispatching the limited number of infected level 2 in the second lab, I did a more thorough search of the area. Using the mirrored layout, I simply went to the corresponding terminals that had revealed early game lore to me, and investigated them. These did help reveal more details. The laboratory director, Eve, corresponded with someone whose name was initially redacted. It seemed like this person was one of her employees, and it seems that the name was redacted due to the fact that these two exchanged rather risque and inappropriate messages over the lab network. Redacted was one of the lead researchers on the fungus experiment, evidently through improper promotions. It was revealed that through some computer logs, that Redacted was at one point infected with the earliest version of the fungus, and it proved to be spreading at an alarming rate. Left with no options, they thrust Redacted into a cryo chamber until they could do further experimentation to determine how to halt the growth of this infection. If you lack basic media literacy, I will state the obvious, which is that Redacted is the player character. From now on, I'm going to be using that name to refer to him or her because it's slightly less cumbersome than repeating my character, or the player character. Armed with this information, I went into the battle with the Forbidden Boss again. This time, the name made more sense to me. I was about 80% of the way through her health bar when I noticed something strange. I was deliberating on whether or not to play it safe and heal up, even though I was only around 40% HP. As I lingered over the med kit on the item menu, there was a slight green glint behind the semi-transparent screen, and I took 10% of damage as if I was getting hit. And suddenly, one of my med kits disappeared. This lanky freak attacked me while I was menuing before I even made my turn. To my knowledge, the other enemies did not do this, as I spent much more time looking through items early on in the game. I felt frustrated as I closed out of the items menu, but then something else struck me. The battle sprite changed, and now the creature was hunched over. Something about its hollow facial expression seemed so much more mournful than before. It was like the boss was upset with me I had spent so much time looking at something other than it. Was this some kind of flavor added to this fight, based on the information I had just uncovered? Something else wormed around in my mind. I was curious what happened if I hit give up. It was a stupid thing to do, obviously, because in the back of my mind I knew what happened. It would play a specific animation of the backside of Redacted yielding, and the creature would consume him with the fungal infection in some way. Yet, despite how perturbed it made me, there was a part of me that wanted to see it. I rationalized it to myself by saying I had already messed up by letting the boss get a free attack on me. I might as well just restart it so I can be up by one medkit. I hit the give up button. The screen faded to black and opened on a cutscene. The gangling infected beckoned Redacted towards the chamber it stood in, and I watched as it embraced Redacted and sealed the two of them in the chamber together. I watched as small spores started to fill the air in the chamber, as if rather than a cryo chamber like in the first lab, this one had been modified to inject more of the mossy fungus into the environment. I heard a low growling wailing noise in my earbuds. Audio was something that had yet to show up in these cutscenes. I twitched a little as I read the accompanying ending message. Back together. Forever. Don't you yearn for something like this? I didn't. Obviously I don't. I yearned to know why 95% of the production time of this game went into animating these stupid game over cutscenes. I went back in and rebooted the game yet again. This time, something possessed me. I felt resolute in finding something. Some example that he couldn't possibly have thought of animating. I found every corner accounted for. If you lose to a level 2 infected, a unique cutscene plays where the gangly creature traps Redacted in a headlock as the decaying microbes extend out from its arm onto its. Conversely, if you give in to a level 2 infected, the mutant can be seen carrying off the willing participant deep into the lab as the fungus spreads. It is possible to trigger an encounter with 2 level 2 infected. A regular defeat shows a screen of the 2 disheveled humanoids pinning Redacted onto its back with both of their arms as the moss engulfs their body as usual. A give-up defeat shows the 2 of them dragging Redacted off by its limbs and strapping him into some sort of stretcher. All the while I uncovered these, each one had a unique message from the game taunting me. All of them were basically the same, asking if I was enjoying or lamenting whether I was enjoying enough, yet all of them were different, handcrafted, put there for a deliberate reason that I could not divine. The unsettling, detailed cutscenes and bizarre messages filled me with a morbid curiosity. With everything that happened, I had just one last itch to scratch. I rebooted again and had to jockey Redacted's position a lot to get him to where I needed to be for this, but eventually I was able to trigger an encounter with 3 level 1 infected in the urban area. Without hesitating, I just selected to give up. The next cutscene that played was around 20 seconds, around double the length of any I had seen so far. With Redacted facing away, the first humanoid grabbed its face, then the other 2 grabbed at each of its arms. The fungus spread, like it always had, but this time, a bit slower, and more all-encompassing until Redacted was fully covered in the grassy substance. They let go of my character, and it slowly turned around. Its face was covered with moss, and it had the same hollow eyes as the boss. However, where its mouth was, twisted open into a wide, empty, toothless grin as it stared back at me, as if manically delighted over its own demise. I felt a shiver go down my spine as this seemingly still frame persisted for another 4 seconds before I was greeted with the following words. You had to go and seek this one out. You really are enjoying yourself. There is so much more the further you go. I shut down the game. I can't explain to you why this game causes me so much agitation. The content is truly tame in itself. Most of the beings are not that disgusting or unfathomable to look at compared to your average zombie gamer flick. The death screens are not even particularly that brutal, but there's just something that unnerves me about how intensely animated everything is. How every single detail is worth a unique animation. And more importantly, Why is there some part of me that wants to see them all? This is made all the more confusing by Mike's emails and the little notes left at every endgame screen. I don't know if I really want to continue doing this. This game is somewhat generic in terms of lore, and the actual gameplay combat is genuinely boring. Just hit or be hit, and hope you find the tile that has the weapon upgrade you need to match up against the enemies. I honestly have only found interest in these strangely detailed cutscenes, and it's mostly just bafflement over why they exist. Sound off in the comments if you really want me to keep going with this, because I don't know if I really feel like it.